the Illinois Environmental Council has been around since 1975 to help move policies to protect the land we live on, the air we breathe, and the water we drink, among other priorities. And the way that we do this is by advocating at the state level to pass policies and legislation that help us move these pieces. And over the last few years, we've actually expanded that to the work we do here in the city of Chicago. So we also do a lot of policy and education at the city level. And we're starting to expand a little bit into the federal landscape, but where we really have landed in our success in doing this work here in the state of Illinois. And we're really lucky to have some really strong legislative champions, we call them our green champions. And Representative Lindsey LaPointe has been an environmental champion ever since she was elected. She's received 100% on each one of our environmental scorecards since she's been representing in the district. And all that is from, knowing who the people in the community are and making sure that she represents the values of the people in the community. So we know that people in the 19th district really care about the environment. And for us at IEC, we track environmental legislation every single year. Every year there's over 100 different pieces of legislation that move through the state legislature, and we make sure that we're weighting all that, but all those bills and making sure that we're tracking who votes which way. And we'll be soon releasing the 2024 legislative scorecard, which will be coming out hopefully tomorrow, if not by the end of this week. And I'll give you guys a sneak peek. I'm surprised here. Representative LaPointe received another 100% for our 2024 legislative session. So with that, IEC is honored to have her facilitate this conversation with leading environmental advocates to give your district some more information on some of the exciting developments that are happening across the environmental landscape and in our fight against climate change. So tonight we'll be talking a bit more about some federal support that's coming down from Inflation Reduction Act. We'll also be learning a bit of how to protect wetlands and some resources you all might be able to receive for any flooding issues that might come into your communities. You'll hear a little bit more about the electric grid and how advocacy can help us make it stronger and make it easier for us to electrify our homes and our roads. And finally, keeping our great state beautiful through green policy. So with that, I'm going to go to Representative.
Thank you. All right, mic's working. Okay, so we're about 10 minutes behind, and the bulk of what we're here to do is to listen to the panelists. We have one virtually, but I'm going to introduce them right now. And no one wants to hear long bios, so I'm not going to read long bios, but I am going to say a few things, and I'm saying it in the spirit of this. I think it's so important and really awesome that you can do this really impactful environmental work for your actual job. And you're all doing it. And so you might know young people who are passionate about the environment, who might have a future in this. Maybe people of any age wants to learn how you crack into this. So I am gonna just touch on a little bit of the background. So I'll share a little background about everybody before I turn it over to Angela. So Angela, on the furthest west side of the table, Angela Shu is the Municipal Engagement Manager with the Illinois Environmental Council. That's our big umbrella organization for environmental advocates in Illinois. So in Angela's job, she engages with Illinois communities, grassroots organizations, nonprofits, community leaders, governmental officials to educate people on the implementation and the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act. Angela has a JD from Stetson University College of Law, where she concentrated in environmental law, and a Bachelor's of Fine Arts from the SAIC in Chicago. See, look, we can be multifaceted people. Welcome, Angela. We look forward to hearing from you first and just a few. Next down the line, we have Tarek Shahzad, who is our government affairs point person at the Nature Conservancy. Tarek works with that organization to educate Illinois decision makers, I'm one of them, on policies that will protect lands and water on which all life depend on. Super passionate bird watcher and has done a lot of work at our Dunning-Reed Conservation Area, might I add. Tara graduated from Middlebury College in Vermont with a degree in environmental studies. Next, who's going to be coming over Zoom, we have Christine Nonicelli, who works for the Sierra Club. And Christine is responsible for guiding the entire strategic direction of the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal work in Illinois. So that's just one of the many, many things under the environmental umbrella of making sure that we transition away from coal and into clean energy. Her work was super critical when we passed the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, which many of you emailed me and met with me about. And most recently, Christine did a lot of work on the carbon capture and sequestration law that we passed just this spring. Christine has a BA from Northwestern and studied religion and political science. And then finally, Sergio Vargas is also with the Illinois Environmental Council and has been instrumental in advancing the climate and conservation goals in Chicagoland specifically, and we need a lot of work to be done. Specifically, Sergio did a lot of work on the Vote Yes campaign that some of you worked on that resulted in $40 million for the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. Sergio went to UIC locally and graduated with a degree in public policy with a specialization in education and the environment. So I know that was long-winded, but I do think it's really important to know what people's pathway is into this environmental advocacy work, and some of it is paid, and that's a good thing. So I'm going to hand it over to Angela.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you very much, Representative, for having us. And it's, I really appreciate everyone joining us today under the heat index as well as on Zoom from home. But yeah, my name is Angela Shute, and I am the Municipal Engagement Manager with the Illinois Environmental Council. So I'll skip this part because Danny gave a great background on our organization, but very high level, I will be talking about the Inflation Reduction Act. You may have heard what it is, but it's kind of a little foggy, right? Well, what I can say is that it is the largest climate legislation signed in the United States history. When the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law came out, that was the largest one, and the IRA easily dwarfs that. There's over 120 different programs. It was signed into law in 2022, and investments are projected to achieve up to 40% reduction in climate pollution by 2030. We're already seeing hundreds of thousands of clean energy jobs being created. So it's very exciting. But I can't talk about the IRA without talking about Illinois' CEJA, or the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, passed in 2021. CEJA really set the stage for Illinois. It created the foundation to bring in a lot of this federal funding. We're seeing really good clean energy jobs, and this is really what's propelling us forward in Illinois with this federal funding. And so this is going to be quite a bit of information, but please don't worry about writing it down or anything. Those fact sheets on the table outside that has all the information that you can need from this presentation. And I always have an open door and welcome to reach out anytime if you have a question. So at a high level, we have a few different program areas under the IRA. We'll talk about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, the Rural Energy for America program is part of that too. And also part of the IRA are a lot of these really important environmental justice provisions under which we have community change grants. And then where can we see these benefits here at home in the community? It's through these various tax credits, reductions, rebates, and then at the municipal level, direct pay. So I'll start with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. As it would suggest by the name, it finances greenhouse gas emissions reductions for communities. And what does this mean for Illinois? Well, under this GGRF, there were several competitions for funding. Here in Illinois, we were a sub-awardee of $5 billion, which is incredible. And in addition to that, we also received $156 million for the US EPA's Solar for All program. What does that do? That expands our Illinois Solar for All at the state, as well as Illinois Shines. So then here in communities, low income to medium income communities can benefit and get money back for solar. And here's that really exciting announcement that just happened this April. Also, the climate pollution reduction grant is a huge one for the CPRG that helps the states, local governments, and MSAs or metropolitan statistical areas implement these policies to facilitate pollution reduction. So here in Illinois, very recently on my birthday is the best birthday gift, July 22nd this year, more than $430 million was awarded to Illinois through the CPRG. So we're going to reduce pollution in the building sector, transportation, energy grid, and much more. And I talked about those US EPA, EJ provisions. So we're looking at the community change grants. This is really going to look at this map that the US EPA released, which designates EJ areas. And it shows that this funding is going to go to the areas that need it the most. The places that are underfunded or underdeveloped, they're going to be the ones who see the benefit of these clean energy jobs, of this funding directly going to their communities. And a way that this is going to happen is through the environmental justice technical assistance centers. So let's say you're part of a municipality or you're part of a nonprofit that really wants to apply to this work, but you don't have the capacity, you don't have a grant writer. Well, you can actually go to one of these EJ Tic Tacs, is the fine name for it, and they will have people who can help you write those grants, who can help you assess your applications and get that information green Tic Tac that service different regions of Illinois within the US Region 5. I did mention that there's also tax credits as well as adders. So you can actually get the tax credits back when you invest or create a clean energy project. And then on top of that, you can add on depending on your eligibility. So this is just a visual to show you just how many tax credits there can be. One of those tax credits is an energy community credit, where in Illinois, as you can see, the map of Illinois lights up, especially in the central and southern region and parts of the Northwest. Those are all designated as energy communities that can really benefit from these tax credits. Maybe they've been impacted by a coal mine closure, or maybe they have a population that is really seeing the impacts of climate change more than others. So let's say you have a low-income communities bonus credit that you want to add on, and you also want to use a domestic content bonus tax credit, which means that your project uses domestic content. So it uses materials that was created in America, in the United States, which is a big part of the IRA. You can actually then stack these credits, and then let's say you have an electricity tax credit plus those two adders on top. Already, that is 50% of that project you can get the credit back for. So this is really substantial through the IRA. And then again, I mentioned with municipalities, they can actually get money back through direct pay. So this is really big because a lot of entities do not pay taxes, for example, if they're a nonprofit, or let's say you're just an entity that has been tax exempt. But then how can you get these tax credits back? Well, through direct pay by the US Treasury. If you create this clean energy project and you actually invest in it, you can get that money directly back by filing your taxes. And so this is a really awesome incentive to start going green. On those fact sheets outside, you will see several ways that as a homeowner or a renter, you can get these tax credits back. So there's the home energy efficiency tax credit, where let's say you bought a heat pump last year, you plan to buy a heat pump or an electric AC unit. There's rebates that are available to you right now you can get back from making those purchases. And there's also the home energy rebates program that's going to be coming out Q1 of next year, where those rebates are going to be more readily available. There's also really great tax credits if you own a clean vehicle. Let's say you purchase a new or a used electric vehicle, you can get, I think it's around like $7,000 back from that purchase. One of the last notes I'm going to leave you with is, let's say you want to say, I want to know how many programs have been shared here in Illinois. How much funding have we actually gotten in the state? So this is the climate program portal. Registration is completely free and you can look this up. It is updated in live time and it shows you all the investments across the entire country. And this is the most recent graph I pulled for Illinois. As you can see, there's $6 billion already awarded by the state. And the last note I'll leave with you is, if you have a success story, if you know someone who's taking advantage of this IRA fundings, and we really welcome you to share that with us because we want to elevate that story. The more that we can show this cause and effect that says, here, this is actually working. we can have an electric feature that saves us money and also cuts down on emissions. That's what we want to be. And with that, thank you so much. And this is my contact.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm sure you have questions, so we'll have time at the end. Not everything is easy, and I'll give you a specific example with the electric vehicle rebates that we in Illinois did an appropriation so people can get EV rebates. We did not appropriate enough. And so there are people that I represent that bought an EV with the notion that they would get a rebate, but because we ran out of funds in that fiscal year, they did not get one. So I just want to acknowledge the reality that this is all a work in progress, and it's my job to hear your voice and try to push along that progress. So with that, we are gonna now jump into flooding, and here is Tara.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tarek Shazad with the Nature Conservancy. I hope I'm loud enough. I'm not sure if I'm good. All right. So who is the Nature Conservancy? I didn't make a slide about this, but at a high level, the Nature Conservancy is a conservation nonprofit that operates around the globe. And here in the United States, we have about almost 50 chapters in each state. We primarily do direct land conservation work, connecting people to nature. You may have heard of the Chusa grasslands in Illinois, or Emiquon, a wetland of international significance, or Kankakee Sands. Here in our prairie state, we've lost over 99% of our prairie. And a lot of the work that we do when it comes to protecting woodlands or prairies or wetlands are stewarding lands that connect people to nature for generations to come, so we make sure those places aren't wiped out. And that also, in a way, does climate work when it comes to carbon sequestration, because our prairies, our wetlands, our forests sequester carbon and slow climate change. So that's what we do at the Nature Conservancy, and I'm on the government relations team. And today I'll be talking to you about flooding and its solutions. So why does flooding occur? And it occurs in Chicago for a variety of reasons. The most important reason is because historically, Chicago used to be a gigantic swamp. And when we talk about swamps and wetlands, you can imagine Chicago didn't look really like Florida or the Everglades or Louisiana, but more so it looked like a marsh. And a marsh is I would say, a less swampy sort of wetland. You know, no alligators or sort of white ibis, but there was still a lot of wet habitat that had standing water at least 90% of the time during the year. And so that naturally absorbed water. Once we created all this pavement and all these unnatural surfaces, the rain that naturally comes to Chicago needs to go somewhere. And because of our flat landscape, our floodplains are next to rivers like the Des Plaines River, Calumet River, and our old sewer system that combines sewage as well as rainwater, we aren't necessarily prepared for these large downpours, which are getting worse and worse because of climate change. And unfortunately, because climate change isn't stopping, our goal is to slow it as much as possible. These rain events, these 1,000-year, 500-year flood events are becoming common, sometimes happening every other year. And I'm aware that in the Northwest side, we have flooding events where folks' homes and basements become flooded, and that becomes very costly for homeowners and renters and for businesses. And solutions, Illinois needs to step up, and environmental advocates are fighting for folks. So solutions are hopefully coming around the corner. And so when it comes to legislative efforts around flooding and protecting our waterways, I want to talk to you about two different bills that passed and one that is ongoing and we could use your help with. So the first bill was Senate Bill 2743, the State Water Plan Task Force, and that passed this year, and I believe it was signed into law by the governor. And this is going to create a task force administered by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, requiring a state water plan to be published every 10 years. And what this will allow us to do is to, once a state water plan is established and recommendations are brought forth by those task members, then those recommendations can be tracked over a 10-year long period. And once things work out or don't work out, we can learn from those successes and failures. So that's the impetus behind the State Water Plan Task Force. Senate Bill 2601 that passed is a landlord and tenant flood disclosure bill. And this requires landlords to disclose whether their properties are located in a FEMA special flood hazard area. And or if their property has been subject to flooding, I believe in the past 10 years, but it could be through its entire history. So this is an important law when it comes to equity and protecting renters that may not have sort of the knowledge behind whether an area that they're moving into is prone to sort of disastrous flooding. And then lastly is Senate Bill 771, the Wetlands Protection Act. And you may have heard a lot of buzz about this bill on social media or in the mail. And this was a bill that sprung forth because in 2023, the Supreme Court ruled a disastrous decision in Sackett versus EPA, removing protections for isolated wetlands from the Federal Clean Water Act. And a lot of states in this country don't have statewide wetlands protection, so they relied on those federal rules. Illinois does not have statewide wetlands protection codified into law. So the environmental coalition here in the state with the Illinois Environmental Council, Sierra Club, and the Nature Conservancy sprung into action, and we fought for the Wetlands Protection Act. And unfortunately, at the end of the session, we weren't solidly sure that it would pass the legislature. So we're holding off on calling the bill until perhaps the veto session, which I believe is sometime in November. And we will be making a second strong effort at trying to pass this bill. What essentially it will do is require developers to apply for permits when it comes to destroying wetlands, and then those permits will require mitigation. So if they destroy wetlands somewhere, they will need to mitigate and build a wetland somewhere else, sometimes at a higher ratio, so creating more wetlands than they destroy. Wetlands are critically important when it comes to flooding because they naturally absorb stormwater. And like I mentioned earlier, hundreds of years ago, there weren't flooding issues here in the Chicagoland area because our landscape naturally absorbed stormwater. And when it comes to future legislative efforts, I want to highlight House Bill 5297 is a Resilient Illinois Revolving Loan Fund Act. Angela was talking about federal dollars. Well, FEMA, through their Storm Act program, has federal dollars coming into states, to nonprofits and counties for local resilience projects, and that also includes stormwater resilience projects. And what this bill would do is create a fund for Illinois to actually receive these dollars. Right now, Illinois can't receive those dollars through the Storm Act because we don't have anything into law that can sort of receive those dollars. And we did not pass this bill this session, but we may try next session or try to get it passed in an administrative fashion. And when it comes to other future legislative efforts, we recommend following the Illinois Environmental Council, Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, Representative LaPointe's office, and other folks to stay engaged on matters. Later in the year, typically our environmental advocates finalize our legislative agendas, and we have specific issue areas like flooding and stormwater that we'll know more in detail what we'll be fighting for. And when it comes to specific flooding in your homes and in your neighborhoods here in the district, I want to talk to you a little bit about pre-flooding mitigation, what happens when there is a flood, and what you should do post a flood. So the first thing you could do is disconnect your downspouts from the sewer. And this is something that you could do without a contractor and with very little spent on your own dime. And so I recommend visiting the City of Chicago's website and looking up downspout disconnection to learn more. And it's a very simple process, but you want to make sure you follow the directions carefully. And that will divert water away from the sewage system and more so towards trees and plants and to prevent flooding in the neighborhood. Next, you could order and install a rain barrel from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago's website. And I have the link right here spelled out for you, mwrd.org/community-action/rain-barrels. And I believe a barrel goes for about $40, and they will help alleviate flooding and water impacts on the roof and other parts of your home. And one particular method I strongly recommend is planting native plants around your apartment and your homes. So landscaping with native plants and trees, what this flora naturally does is absorb water. First, it removes pavement and creates soil. Soil naturally absorbs water, but also these plants rely on water and absorb water. And this will mitigate flooding, not only in your neighborhood, but also when it comes to your basement and your property. And green infrastructure. So all of these sorts of items are types of green infrastructure, ways that we're trying to mimic the natural water cycle. Instead of building pavement and detention and retention ponds, putting more of a focus on beautification and the environment. That's what a rain barrel or planting native plants does. And who can apply for, and I want to highlight to a specific green infrastructure partnership program through MWRD. And the folks that can apply are park districts, school districts, townships, county agencies, and municipalities. And so individuals can apply for this green infrastructure partnership program, but those entities can. And folks here are members of those entities. So I highly encourage you to advocate for those entities, if you're a part of those, to apply for this partnership program. The pre-application approval process is due by December 31st of this year, and perhaps you can get more green infrastructure subsidized by MWRD in your township or your school district into your neighborhood. It'll not only benefit you, but also your neighbors. And when you have flooding occurring at the moment, the first thing you should do is find the source of the flooding. So is it, figure out what it is. Is it a seepage? Is it sewer backup? Is it stormwater from too much rain? Is it perhaps a leak in your home? Contact your municipality next. Call 311 or your local public works department. And then number 3 is something people overlook often, is to take photos and video evidence of all the damage that occurs and record serial numbers of the most expensive items that are damaged or destroyed, like your fridge, for example. If you have flood insurance, please file your claim immediately, like with the National Flood Insurance Program. And I have the number on here, but you could also Google the program too. And once flooding does occur, there is federal assistance you can receive through FEMA, and there's an individuals and households program, shorthand is IHP. And I have the website here, www.disasterassistance.gov or 1-800-621-3362. Please note this is not a replacement for insurance, but rather it's meant to be supplemental for flood insurance. And if you have any questions, my email is right here, my first.last name @tnc.org. And perhaps we'll take questions at the end of the presentations.
Thank you so much. As Danny brings on our next panelist who's coming in over Zoom, who's going to talk about grid reliability, I'm going to again be the voice of reality here. That was awesome. I want to say one thing about flooding. Ooh, many of us experienced it in the basements on the northwest side, especially after July 2023. Because Cook County was deemed a disaster area, it unlocked payment relief. And so people were getting it. And that was great. And people were actually getting it really fast. Payments of $2,000, $5,000, $8,000 that we were hearing about. And once it was unlocked, because Cook County was deemed a disaster area, we were hearing it was fairly easy, but I just do want to acknowledge if the county isn't deemed a disaster area, it gets much, much harder to get that federal FEMA relief. And with that, we're going to try to bring in Christine here.
Christine, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me okay? How's the audio?
The audio.
The audio was better and now it's not as bad. Now it's not as great.
Okay. How about now?
Much better, thank you.
Much better? Okay. All right. My apologies that I cannot be there in person. It was my daughter Lola's first day of pre-K. I promised her I would have ice cream sundaes with her before bedtime. So that is the reason I am not with you guys in person. So my apologies. And I have to give a shout out to Tarek, great presentation. That was the most practical presentation I've ever heard on an IEC town hall before. And since I work exclusively in the power sector, I want to say, as a non-flooding expert, that all the things that you talked about, after my basement flooded 2 years ago in Chicago, I disconnected my downspouts, put in native plants in a rain garden, got 2 discounted rain barrels, haven't had a flood since. So just wanted to lift that up as a non-expert endorsement of your presentation. Appreciate it. So I'm Christine Anicelli. I am a senior campaign rep with Sierra Club, Illinois. Work predominantly in the power sector, guiding our work to move from fossil fuels and dirty energy to 100% clean energy. And proud to support and work for great environmental champions across the state and our state legislature, like Representative LaPointe. So thank you so much, Representative, for hosting tonight, and IEC and others, and thank you all for joining. So let's dig in. We'll give a quick walkthrough of what's happening with our power grid and our electricity sector. And I'll note real quick, we are there's Illinois Environmental Council, and then we also have a broader Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, which is made up of dozens of different organizations and partners across the state, really uniquely focused on energy issues. So we've been around since about 2014, but that is the umbrella that I want to talk under for our power sector work. So next slide. Just to highlight a couple of key priorities, and I'll highlight why we're working on these priorities. Clean power, number one. We're working to get a 100% clean energy power sector by 2050, and getting a fossil free power grid as well by 2035. We've made some progress on this, but we know we need to do more. And this is the area that I'm particularly focused in. And then you'll note, and I think you're going to hear a little bit more maybe about some of the transportation pieces, but there are other parts of our economy that have huge amounts of pollution that we need to address, and that's transportation and then how we heat our buildings. So these are really the 3 main areas of the work that we are doing as a coalition to position Illinois as a climate leader. Next slide. And why are we doing that? And this is a little bit of a reality check here. We still rank 7th for the most climate polluting states in the nation. We have a very energy intensive economy, and when we step back, we have a huge role to play in addressing this footprint. And one of the things that we do is we need to look across the economy at different sectors and see where are these emissions coming from. And that has played a significant role in orienting us to where we should be focusing our work and our campaigns. And historically, the number one source of emissions has come from the electric power sector. That has changed because of a lot of our work to retire coal plants, to bring online more clean energy. But there's still a lot of work to be done. We'll talk about that next. But number one currently is the transportation sector. We have a filthy transportation sector. Next, power sector is number 2. We have a very energy intensive industrial sector. And then we disproportionately heat most of our buildings with methane gas, which is heavily polluting. So this not only has an impact on our climate, of course, and contributing to more and more flooding that Tarek talked about, but it also has a significant impact on our air quality. And we have some of the poorest air quality in the nation that come from power plants, that come from diesel powered trucks and cars, and right in our own homes where we're burning gas to make our dinners. So we've got a lot of work to do, but we have made some progress. Next slide. I think Representative LaPointe, you talked a bit, you mentioned the passage of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, We passed this in 2021. This has become essentially a national model for a lot of states, and looking at not only how do we advance clean energy at the state level, but how does it work in an equitable way? What does the clean energy economy look like? And that was some of the hallmark components of CEJA, as we fondly refer to it. Next slide. And Angela, you mentioned, I think, this CEJA briefly in your remarks, but Danny, next slide, if you can. Can you guys hear me? No? You guys still there?
We're here. You're cutting in and out somewhat.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear. Okay. Can we move to the next slide? Can you guys hear me okay? How are we doing on audio?
I can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay. Folks in the room? Folks in the room, could we move to the next slide? All right, awesome. All right. Okay, all right, awesome, thank you. So we passed CEJA, and as I mentioned, a huge emphasis on workforce training, making sure that we had good quality jobs. When I think about CEJA, it's more than just getting us on track to 100% clean energy, locking coal and gas plants into a responsible transition timeline. But as I mentioned, making sure that we have an equitable clean energy economy that looks vastly different from the fossil fuel economy. And so since the passage of that bill, we have made a lot of progress. And from the Future Energy Jobs Act that came before that, we've seen tremendous growth. We are now a Midwest leader in clean energy for solar and wind. These policies are delivering. And in particular, I think we're seeing these smaller scale projects on rooftops and in community solar projects around the state in ways that was what we'd envisioned, and they're delivering. But we still have a long way to go, and there's still some more work to do. So next slide. All right. So I think one of the most significant things that we have to do, we have to strengthen our power grid. We are working to build a 21st century clean energy economy, but we're doing so with a 20th century power grid. And we're doing so with one that is long overdue for updates to transmission wires, and a grid that is increasingly at risk from extreme weather events and instances during peak demand. So peak demand being, a heat wave coming through in the summer. I'm based in Chicago, so I think about today, pretty hot. So everyone's blasting their AC. That puts a lot of strain on the power grid. In instances of big winter storms, those are moments of peak demand as well. And these types of incidents are going to be happening more frequently, more intensely with the impacts of climate change. And it's making our outdated power grid more and more at risk. And at a time when we're really trying to make a critical transition to sustainable clean energy. Now, we have regional grid operators across the country, and unfortunately, they've been pretty slow to keep up with the pace of this transition, and have fallen behind in making some of those upgrades to the grid as we've needed. But they are starting to take some steps forward, which is good, but there's still a lot of work that they need to do, and there's still a whole lot of work that we need to do at the state level to support them. Next slide. And the other key piece, I think, to keep in mind is since the passage of CEJA, we have to remember that the goalposts are moving. We're not just working to replace retiring coal and gas and nuclear power with clean energy. We now need to work rigorously to electrify our transportation sector. We need to electrify our building sector. That is one of, the power sector is really the foundation here of so much of our work economy-wide to decarbonize, and we are that foundational building block. And so we need to make sure that our power grid is as strong and as clean as possible as we work to make this transition across our economy. So next slide. Here's some of the things that we need to do that are in the Clean and Reliable Grid Act. We're calling SERJA, Senate Bill 3637. Here are some of the key things that we feel like are mission critical to strengthening our power grid overall. Next slide. So first up, energy efficiency. The most cost-effective energy is the energy we don't use, right? This is cost-effective, but it's an important way that we protect and make the grid more resilient. We reduce demand, and that goes for not just residential customers, but we want to be getting more of these large energy-intensive industrial customers in the mix and making critical energy savings and putting less strain on the power grid. So we're going to strengthen and update our energy efficiency standards. We're going to also work on lowering peak demand by working with utilities to make sure that they're offering the most dynamic types of rate programs for customers that help us shift, for customers who are interested, shift your use to off-peak times so that we're able to, balance out that demand a bit more on the power grid. We want to make sure that we are expanding clean energy across the board. One of the things we have to do, we have to build more clean energy faster and faster and faster, even beyond what our renewable portfolio standard has put in place. We need to keep building and keep building. And a key player in all of this are municipal utilities and electric cooperatives that serve over 1 million Illinois residents, folks that don't get their power from Ameren or ComEd, and folks that can uniquely benefit from many of the great new tax incentives that Angela talked about in the IRA. But munis and co-ops, as we like to talk about, are not doing that. They are not doing effective energy planning. We know that they could be huge clean energy builders, and we want to be getting them in the mix here in this transition. We want to be encouraging the Illinois Power Agency, who does those clean energy plans for ComEd and Ameren, to do longer term ones that we think are going to be critical to getting more larger scale clean energy projects online. And lastly, we want to make it easier to build transmission lines. These are our, high interstate power lines or highway systems of the power grid. It helps us move power more efficiently and effectively across the region, and it's going to be critical to bringing on more clean energy and helping to take dirty energy offline. So these are some of the key components of SERJA that we need to get done as soon as possible, if not in the fall veto session, hoping in the legislative session in January. And as part of that, next slide, we have not proposed this in our bill, but we are in enthusiastic conversations with many stakeholders around getting a robust battery storage policy for Illinois. We are making great progress on wind and solar. We can do more, we need to do more, but we need to be getting battery storage more in the mix. These are, that is a particularly critical resource, especially paired with clean energy, that's going to be essential as we start to take more and more fossil fuel power plants offline. And then there are additional adjustments. I think Representative LaPointe made this note earlier about the need to update and adjust as we work through so many of these different issues. There are going to continue to be a lot of different things and tweaks that we need to make to these policies. And there's another one we need to make to our Illinois renewable portfolio standard to make sure that we are hitting our clean energy targets that we're setting out year after year as we replace dirty energy. So these are some of the key things that we need to be doing at a state level to better position our power grid to move to clean energy and to prepare to decarbonize other sectors. And encourage folks in the audience. You heard a lot of great ideas and things from Angela and incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act. Take advantage of them. Look into what those rebates are, weatherize your homes. If you can get solar on your rooftops, those are all ways that you can reduce your impact and demand on the power grid. And that's going to be huge in helping to maintain a more resilient power system. So thank you all for the time to talk to you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sergio Vargas. I'm the Chicagoland Conservation Manager at the Illinois Environmental Council. Today I'll be talking about Illinois' Beautiful Nature-Based Solutions campaign, which is something that myself and a couple other folks at IC are working on. And so what is Illinois' 30 by 30 nature-based solutions coalition that we're building, right? The mission is to advocate for state policy that aligns with the international 30 by 30 campaign to conserve 30% of land and water by 2030. So this international 30 by 30 campaign was created by the Biden administration with the same kind of national goals and international goals of conservation and preserving the beauty of the natural world that we have here in the United States. And the vision is to create equitable, biodiverse, and climate resilient Illinois. So again, this mission and vision aligns with this national goal, but really understanding how can we localize these efforts and how does this national campaign really relate to the work and context of different Illinois communities. And our coalition members include other environmental organizations, land trusts, outdoor recreation advocates, community organizations, and agricultural partners. Obviously, agricultural partners is a massive component to this piece, considering that the state of Illinois is a massive agricultural presence. And so America the Beautiful and Illinois 30 by 30, the national goals include creating more parks and nature-deprived areas, supporting tribally led conservation efforts, expanding wildlife corridors, increasing outdoor recreation access, and rewarding voluntary conservation efforts by landowners and farmers. And the Illinois specific goals that align with these national goals continue to be ensuring equity in community decision making. So reaching out to different communities, understanding what the challenges and progress are in these different communities and how we can amplify and support various local efforts, and improving water resilience to climate impacts. And as I'll get to further in this presentation, there's a lot of interesting byproducts of our agricultural presence. And we're supporting sustainable local food systems and agriculture. Okay, great. Thank you. And so the 6 pillars that really guide this work include outdoor access, clean water, jobs, local food, sustainable agriculture, and the public process. So with outdoor access, our goal is to ensure that every citizen has access to green space and that access should not be hindered by distance or feelings of unsafety. And only 55% of Americans live within a 10-minute walk of a natural area that they can access. And even though it might be a 10-minute walk, that 10-minute walk looks very different for different communities, right? Maybe it's crossing a very busy road, or walking across cracked sidewalk or something of that nature, right? It can be incredibly challenging for different members of different communities to access these outdoor areas. So understanding the nuance of both proximity to nature, as well as how easily families and other folks can access these green spaces is incredibly important to remember and to ensure when we're thinking practically about the expansion of green space and outdoor access, and those who continue to be have challenges when accessing these areas. Another component again is jobs, right? When I supported and worked on the Vote Yes referendum, one of the biggest components or pieces of the campaign was the job component, right? People are really interested in not only accessing nature, but understanding what role they can play in it in regard to a career or maybe a seasonal job for young adults that are interested in conservation or environmental advocacy and want to experience a career that connects them with nature and improves their general understanding of the world that they live in. And the Illinois Department of Natural Resources supports over 90,000 jobs and directly employs 1,200. And although a lot of these jobs are supported, there's still continue to be deferred maintenance, upwards of $6.5 billion, and national parks that will require a larger workforce to do these things. And, one of the largest kind of things that need to be done at a lot of natural areas is invasive species removal. That's one of the biggest jobs that are tackled, right? Ensuring that the flora and fauna of different natural areas continue to thrive and be enjoyed by folks who access these areas. It's not an issue that goes away once you do the maintenance once. It's going to be a job that is continued to be needed because invasive species, once they're here, they're going to be continuing. They're going to be a continued presence, and they need continued work and care. Another component is clean water. All Illinois communities are resilient to the flood impacts of climate change through utilizing multi-benefit projects that improve public safety, social equity, biodiversity, water quality, water security, and quality of life. As Harika mentioned, right, flooding continues to be a massive issue, and we're seeing the presence of more disastrous and tumultuous storms, especially in the Chicagoland region, and the consequences to homeowners and residents continue to be felt, especially by some of the poorest communities. So ensuring that we can continue to build these resilient communities, whether it's through supporting wetlands that can absorb these the massive amounts of stormwater, or ensuring that we're expanding the urban tree canopy, because trees, not only are they wonderful habitats for birds, but they also work to mitigate some of the worst outcomes of flooding. Local food continues to be another component that a lot of communities are really interested in. I think, especially over the past couple of years, people are very sensitive to their health and understanding where our food comes from. And due to our presence as a massive agricultural state, it's really helped communities understand what is our role in the larger mosaic of agriculture in the United States. And over 70% of our state is composed of farmland, yet we import over 95% of the food that we consume on an annual basis, right? That's really interesting that Although 3/4 of all the land use within the state of Illinois is dedicated to farmland, we're still importing a majority of the food that we're consuming. So the goal is to ensure that every Illinois resident has access to healthy, environmentally stable, and ethically sourced food, including but not limited the right to grow their own food, right? So understanding how we can support local producers and ensure that the grip of a few monopolies within the state of Illinois in regard to the agricultural sector aren't the only actors within the space. And again, that transitions to this last point, which is, or not last, second last point, sustainable agriculture, ensuring that Illinois-based farm operators adopt holistic farming practices that improve both soil and water quality, increasing and promoting carbon capture, and maintaining the economic well-being of the farm community. Illinois has some of the best soil in the world. It's the envy of many other countries, many other farmers from around the world. So it's a disaster what these large monocultures and large producers are doing to really degrade the soil over time, where we're sucking out all the carbon, nitrogen, other elements that are really important that are otherwise important in growing our food, resulting in less nutritious food than we've ever had before. Solely because the soil itself doesn't have the right elements and nutrients that are being absorbed and ending up in the byproduct of our food. And lastly, we want to center the public process, which is when communities are not able to participate in the planning process of the government, it can lead to environmental and political impacts. Obviously, we understand this national campaign is trying to connect with communities, right? But this coalition that we're continuing to build with the mosaic of environmental partners, land trusts, and so forth, really this last component is to ensure that we're reaching out to communities and understanding what specific issues folks are dealing with and understand how they can play a role in fixing a lot of the issues that we've outlined, right? Whether it's interesting clean water issues within your community, or maybe there's an abundance of local food producers, small local food producers that need to be amplified, need to be supported through policy that we're working to pass. It all really helps to ensure that we're localizing these efforts and supporting this larger national framework. And here's my contact information. I really appreciate your all's time, and really hope that we can continue to work to preserve and conserve Illinois land.
Thank you, Sergio, and we'll make sure we post these slides. You don't have to write down everyone's email address. It's 7:15 and we started 10 minutes late, so we pushed it a little bit. No event can happen in 1 hour, it's just impossible. We do want to give people an opportunity to ask questions, and I think we'll try it like this. If you're comfortable, and hopefully you are, this is a very supportive environment. Raise your hands, ask your question, and I can repeat it on the microphone in case anyone didn't hear it or in case our folks on Zoom didn't hear it. I also want to give people permission to leave if they have to leave. So don't fret about that. Do it if you have to do it, but can't leave without giving the opportunity for questions. All right, we'll go with this gentleman on the left first.
Is there any incentive, either at the state or federal level, to get farmers to grow cover crops once they've already soybean, which we also do in the state? And I understand cover crops have nutrient, have something with carbon capture.
Excellent question. I'm going to repeat that just so people on Zoom can hear it. The question was, is there any incentive at the state or federal level for farmers to grow cover crops?
Yes. Oh, it's like short, right? Yeah, yes, there is. And one of our other staffers, Elliot Clay, is really involved in that particular area. And they continue to support expansions of cover crop programming. and really communicating with farmers from across the state about the benefits, not only for their yields, but for the planet, right? Because I think a lot of small farmers want to do good by the state, they want to do good by the environment. So when they're presented with information about these programs that they might not have necessarily known about, it really helps to unlock, the ability to access these programs and maybe have the support of learning more deeply about how they can expand or how they can help even improve these programs. But yes, there is a lot of efforts that we're working on at IEC in regard to cover crops and planting other necessary things.
Great question. Jean in the front.
Yes, I think this is something I emailed you a while ago. When we talk about clean energy, it always comes up with solar. Sometimes we talk about wind. I never hear anybody ever really discussing, aside from air source heat pumps. There's cold weather ones that are up here now and so forth. Nobody's really dealing with the geothermal, the ground source. I mean, the ground source heat pump issue. I've been on a couple of webinars about this, but I'm interested with, I hear panels like this and I never hear that come up, where it looks like it's the most efficient energy way of going, other than the air source heat pump, which is far less efficient than a geothermal system. And I know Chicago is delving into this now to some extent, they've got permitting for it. But I'm just curious, has anybody else heard more about that? And is there any kind of initiative to try to get more people educated on that, to see if we can do more of that in Chicago to make more homes more energy efficient in that respect? Because it's more efficient than any other source.
Really good question. I'm going to summarize it for the people on Zoom. What is going on with geothermal and why are we not talking about it?
That's a really good question. And I think part of the problem with geothermal is it does take a lot to like dig into the ground. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying it. A few years ago, I was able to participate in a discussion with the pipe fitters, the local pipe fitters union. And there was a engineer and scientist who came from Colorado to talk a little bit more about how do we transition their current job away from natural gas towards geothermal outfitting. I think that's part of the conversation that we're really digging into. I think part of the tough nut that we need to crack is figuring out how much funding it actually is going to take. And a little bit of that, why you're seeing some movement here in the city of Chicago, is we're looking to start a pilot project to figure out like what is the length of time, how big of a endeavor it's going to take, because it is, regrounding a lot of pipe in the ground to like reconnect areas where there's hundreds of years of infrastructure already built in around it. So I think geothermal might be a little bit better in areas where you're like building new, and that's where like it might be easier to build out, and that's why like a lot of the conversation's been on solar and wind, because that is built on top of the ground and it takes less to excavate and do that kind of work. But it is something, like you're saying, it is one of the more efficient ways of cooling and heating our homes. And it is one of those things that we're working with our engineers to figure out what is the price on the geothermal, so then we can make the case to make this a bigger piece of work.
Because it's longer lasting, from what I understand, even almost 50 years with some of the things than what we're dealing with solar and these other alternatives that seem to be the quick fix, but they're not necessarily the longer term,
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're both saying. There is an interest in our organization looking into that in terms of policy. So you're absolutely correct that that's an avenue we should be taking a look into. As to answer your question as to why are we not looking at it right now, there's also the considerations of put my legal hat on, right? I did some research into like municipal geothermal setbacks, right? So now we're talking about property law. We're talking about how can we install it next to water pipes, et cetera. And so other states are implementing it. And so we like to look at how other states and other regions are modeling it, and then how we can bring it back to Illinois. So there is interest there. We're not saying like, no way, we're definitely interested, but it's a very novel technology that we're.
Well, let me just add to that, because water pipes, all that seem to come in through the front of the homes. if they can find a way to go in the yard, aside from maybe a line that's going to a garage with electrical, there's no other pipes in the backyards. And I mean, they have new drilling capabilities with smaller units that can come in, so, I mean, I've been on another webinar on this whole issue, but I'm fascinated that I never hear other environmental groups, you know, jumping in on it, and it just seems to be something that seems to make far more sense, and maybe not alone, but in conjunction with these other initiatives. So, but just throw my 2 cents out there.
No, absolutely, and then you also think about, the digging into the wells, and then, you know, who has the rights to start digging, where should we be digging? So yeah, those are really great questions.
My follow-up question to that, which we won't answer tonight, but I just want to put it out there, is for me as a state policymaker, and where should I be listening for those geothermal conversations so I can be ready with others to move the ball forward? Colin in the back.
Thanks for being here. I'm just curious if anybody's comfortable sharing where at this point CJ is lagging and not really performing, right? It's probably what it was designed to be, if you're all comfortable talking about those areas.
That's a great question. I had my own similar one. I'm gonna just repeat it, because it's possible Christine is the best to answer that over Zoom. So the question is, if we're comfortable sharing, hopefully we are. Where is the implementation of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act lagging the most? And where are we the most behind?
Christine, unfortunately, isn't here anymore on Zoom, but I think there's a very layered approach to why CJ has lagged behind. Part of it was it's a massive bill that the state just wasn't ready. The agencies that we put on state weren't ready to build out the programs in the timely manner that we initially anticipated. I think that was partially on the advocates to build a longer on-ramp. Really thinking about different components of CJ, right? We have the workforce programs that go through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. The DCEO had to staff up new grant reviewers, new program developers, develop out the training programs in conjunction with a couple of colleges to make sure that the training programs that are training up solar installers and wind installers and energy efficient installers were being built up to match what was needed for the state. I think on top of that, we were also going through the aftermath of the pandemic that really slowed down a lot of the supply and demand that was needed to build out the necessary solar installations and wind turbines. So we're kind of seeing like a domino effect of, the resources weren't there. We're a little bit behind on the training components to build up the infrastructure that's needed to get us to where we need to be to meet the renewable portfolio. And I think a lot of that is a lot of the work that the Clean Jobs Coalition continues to do is just keeping the agencies accountable to their timelines and putting that pressure and making sure that we're hearing from community members across the state. They're wondering like, where are these jobs coming from, or when can we expect solar energy to be powering our homes? And I think this is kind of the fuel that we need to make sure that we're continuing to put that pressure, and also looking and discussing with the different agencies that are working through this on expediting some of the bureaucracy and red tape that goes into the processes of staffing up and building the programs as needed. Great question.
We're gonna do one more question, second row.
I do like the services locally in my neighborhood, in my ward, state, and federal government to help promote and work environment.
What a great question to end on. Thank you so much for that. Maybe we can do popcorn answers. We are gonna have to stand up and come to the microphone. So you're gonna get answers from everybody. Here's how we're gonna end. Get ready, get up, popcorn answers. So I'm gonna say, because I'm a policymaker, get tapped into the Illinois Environmental Council and the Sierra Club, who will update you on what state legislation is pending, and then you can easily let your state lawmakers know how you feel about it. So that's my answer.
Yeah, if you're thinking really locally, you know, join a community garden, or if there's a local tree planting effort, that's going on that you can tap into. I think those are really great ways to really directly impact your own communities, right? Although at IAC, we're really focused on passing state legislation, you know, I think it's incredibly important to stay locally focused as well, and connect with other members of your community that are really interested in that and similar work, and see what other community organizations are out there that you can dedicate a little bit of your time to, whether it's on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. Continue to just connect with other folks in your community. I think that's especially needed, and connecting communities is gonna inevitably be needed when we're mobilizing folks to push for a particular piece of legislation.
Great answer, Sergio. Yes, your representatives care very much what you think. So meeting with them, calling their office, writing to them, showing up and speaking to them in person. And also, we have witness slips, so you can actually go and fill out a witness slip that says, hey, this is what I believe in. I see this bill and I vote for it, or I don't vote for it. And so, just, you know, getting up there and really making voice heard. And as the representative shared, you can sign up for our alerts and we will share those bills with you.
Yes, and on the point of talking to legislators, I get paid to be a lobbyist, but in a way you could lobby too. So the Illinois Environmental Council and other entities host these lobby days where, if you check out their websites, there's certain days every spring where you can head down, and there are organized groups that lead you to your legislator offices and other legislators' offices, where you can advocate specifically for bills, and you'll be prepped in order to do so. You get to it's sort of like a lobbyist taking their neighbors and constituents to work day, and you get to sort of play as a lobbyist and try to make as much of an impact as possible. And the other thing I want to really emphasize is to leverage your connections. So yes, inform Representative LaPointe about the things you care about, but also when it comes to your family and your friends and your connections and your colleagues. When the folks who live outside of the district and other districts in Illinois, it's really important to ask them to care about environmental issues too. Perhaps they live in a Senate district or in a House district where that representative isn't so aware of certain environmental issues, right? Maybe they don't know that wetlands absorb water, or they don't know that solar is much cheaper and is much better for the air than burning fossil fuels, right? So it's about informing folks around us and then asking other folks to stand up with us. Because if we stand up alone, we're going to be pretty weak. But if we stand up as a coalition, we can really get things done.
I will just close out by saying all of the above, but also, it's about making, the personal choices every single day of how do you communicate with other folks on environmental issues, and how you live those values yourself, right? Whether that is, making a choice of planting some native plants to help bring some livelihood to your neighborhood, but also help reduce potential harms for flooding, or making a decision to maybe not drive every single day and take a train ride or a bus ride or a bike ride to a local area rather than using your car for every trip. Or if we're talking about like zero waste, making sure that we're reusing a lot of the products that are being sold to us, or making those constant choices of what do we buy at the store, so we're not putting more plastic out into the atmosphere. So I think a lot of that, you can find ways on how to make those choices and learn more about the policies that are being developed. Everyone's mentioned the Environmental Council. I also work for the Environmental Council. Definitely want to pitch that out there. Our website allows you to sign up for our emails. We have monthly lunch and learns on different subject areas. We cover 6 different issue areas from sustainable agriculture, conservation work, zero waste policies, water protection, energy, and our sixth issue area now is transportation. Christine mentioned that transportation is now the biggest source of carbon emissions. Now, we're looking to help educate folks on the different policy areas and how you can have those conversations with either your local elected official or even your own community, because a lot of that is about building the education and power together to make the changes that we're looking to see. So definitely encourage going to ilenviro.org. We do have some postcards outside that allow you to get that information. And you know, part of joining ilenviro.org is we also put together a legislative report every single year to talk about the main issues that we're going to be advocating for down in Springfield. We do have now one for the city of Chicago City Council as well. That one comes in every 2 years, where the legislative one comes every single year. And then we also have an environmental scorecard where we grade our legislators on their votes that they taken on the environment. So you'll have a really great representative here who's earned 100%, like I mentioned at the top of the hour. So really encourage y'all to stay connected with the Enviro and our partner organizations to keep learning.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for staying a little bit over with us. We're dealing with our technical difficulties.